Feel sick, me. Alright, hello everybody, Adam Cleary, FourFourTwo here. There's only one thing in football right now that anybody's talking about. You've seen it, I've seen it. The handball given against Newcastle United in their game against PSG last night is being described, and I'll put this delicately, as controversial. In fact, so controversial is it I don't think I've ever seen such a unanimous derision of a refereeing decision in my entire life. Obviously, Newcastle, they are furious about it, but I, a Newcastle fan, have literally received texts from Arsenal and Sunderland supporters saying that was a robbery. Do you have any idea how bad a decision has to be to get that sort of United front? But as ever with this sort of thing, there's just loads of stuff floating around today, most of it not actually true. So we're going to break down that penalty decision and show you, rightly or wrongly, why they awarded it. Now, first off, if you've somehow been in a cave on Mars with your eyes shut and your fingers in your ears going, la la la, no football for me, and you somehow haven't seen it, this is what happened. Deep into injury time, and believe me, we will talk about the injury time a little later on as well. PSG get the ball on the right-hand side of the box, attempt to cut it across the face of goal. It bounces off Tino Livramento's body, hits his arm, and the referee, after a lengthy VAR check, although probably not as lengthy as it should have been, awards the penalty. Now, this is the first problem here, because as soon as the ball hits his body and then bounces off, common sense, or certainly how we understand the rules in the Premier League, is that's not a handball. It hits his body first, there's nothing he can do about the subsequent deflection, so it shouldn't be a penalty. Except that is not the rule in the Champions League. They have a different interpretation of that situation than the Premier League does. They do not factor in the ball striking another body part when determining if it's a penalty. Now, you may well have seen this or something like it on social media in the aftermath, a UEFA statement saying no handball offence should be called on a player if the ball is previously deflected from his own body. Now, just to flag this up straight away, that has not been released by UEFA since the game, or certainly not at the time of recording anyway. What that is from, though, is some UEFA guidelines issued in April at the end of last season, saying that next season they should look to implement this law. But crucially, they did not implement this law. It was some guidance given, it was a guideline they wanted to bring in, but they haven't. Now, don't get me wrong, they almost certainly will following this, given the absolute shitstorm that it's caused. But going into this game, that is not the rule. That is not something the referee was supposed to factor in. But the problem with that, then, is that earlier in the game, I think with about 20 minutes to go of normal time, a very similar situation happens. The ball hits Lewis Miley, then jumps up and strikes him on the arm. PSG naturally appeal for a penalty. It goes to VAR. They look at it and they say, no, that's not a penalty. You don't need to come to the monitor. So what's the difference? Why the lack of consistency? Now, it's dead easy to sit there and cry conspiracy or cry incompetency or cry inconsistency or something like that. But if you look at UEFA's interpretation of the handball rule in the box, there is a difference between the two incidents. So in UEFA competitions, they consider three criteria before awarding a penalty in this situation. The first one is if there is a deliberate motion from the hand to the ball. The second is the distance the ball travels. Does the player physically see the ball? Is there anything they can do about the situation? Are they in control of their reaction? And the third is the position of the hand in relation to the ball. Does it fall within a natural profile? And it's that third one which has led to this penalty being given, because if we look at them side by side, the VAR officials have, in their infinite wisdom, deduced that Tino Livramento's arm was not in a natural position and Lewis Miley's was. Now look, if you've just thrown something at your television or your computer, or you've smashed your phone on the floor, then just, like, that's not my interpretation of it. Those are the UEFA rules. That will be the criteria they have considered. That will be what they see as the difference between those two incidents. Right or wrong, that's how they see it. Now, what's insane here is if you look at the two stills side by side, the ball hits the player in pretty much the exact same part of the arm, and that part of the arm is in exactly the same position relative to the rest of the body. The only difference is that Lewis Miley's arm is down by his side when it happens, and Tino Livramento's arm is perceived to be elevated and away from his body. Now, I could sit here and do a video for an hour about how on earth you come to the conclusion that some kind of advantage has been gained from your elbow simply being in a different angle, but I can't. That's just how they've read it. So, as seems to just be always the case now when we talk about refereeing decisions, when you break it down, they've probably enacted the laws the way they have been written. They've technically done the right thing. It's just that the rules themselves are a complete farce. And if you think back, right up until the 94th minute, everybody was full of praise for this referee. Newcastle fans, neutrals, everybody thought he was having a really good game. He wasn't getting intimidated by the atmosphere. He wasn't putting up with PSG surrounding him, asking for decisions. It's the guy who refereed the World Cup final, and it looked like he is one of the best in the game. In this situation, though, the lads in the van, they are not the World Cup final referee. They're not as good as he is. And they looked at the first one and they thought, yeah, arms down by his side, can't really give that. And they looked at the second one and just really quickly came to a conclusion that his arm's up. I genuinely think if they look at it longer and consider where the ball actually strikes the arm, or even if they just compared the two decisions, they'd see there's actually no real difference in the handball, despite the fact that arm is in a very different position. And then, of course, there's the whole matter of the PSG handball, which stopped Alexander Isak getting clean through on goal. There's a coming together, it bobbles around, and the PSG defender does stop the ball rolling through, accidentally, by the way, with his arm. Why isn't that looked at? Well, because VAR don't look at those situations outside the penalty area. It's not something that they are permitted to interfere with. They can't flag the ref up and say, oh, by the way, you need to look at this. There was potentially a goal-scoring opportunity. That's not how it works. It's serious foul play, it's red card offences, and it's penalty incidents. Which means, ironically, of course, if that had happened like 5 yards further forward, if that had been in the box, they would have looked at it, they would have discussed it, referee. Whether they would have given anything for it is another matter entirely, but it would have been within their remit to draw attention to. As it stands, it wasn't. Now, if you've watched this channel a lot, you'll know I try not to be hysterical or dramatic. We're just trying to provide the facts here so that you, a fairly intelligent fan of football, can make your own assessments of it. So as disappointing as that is, I can comfortably say it's one of the most galling ways I've ever seen my team denied a victory in a game of football. It's not what this video's about. But if I may be permitted to just editorialise slightly on this, speaking as a Newcastle fan who watched that game in the pub with his friends and was absolutely floored by the last few minutes and is legitimately considering taking up karate lessons just in case I ever bump into those VAR nerds in the street at any point, I think when we get a bit of perspective, when the dust settles, when we take a step back from that, we shouldn't let that decision ruin what was a brilliant performance and could still be a really good result. Like, it's so hard to take when it happens like that, and I still can't even fully wrap my head around it, having poured through Uefa's rules this morning, but we beat Milan at home, we stay in Europe one way or another. And given the reaction that happened when Newcastle were drawn in that group against PSG, Milan and Dortmund, what a huge achievement that is already. What a great position to be in. I was in New York a couple of weeks ago and there were 4 PSG club shops in New York City either opened or about to open. This is a club with ambitions of being the biggest thing in the entire world, and Newcastle turned up in a situation where they had a 6th former in central midfield and could not make a single substitution and were legitimately denied a brilliant, historic win. And as 442's own Matthew Ketchell, our deputy editor, has already put on Twitter, this game came nearly 2 years to the day of that Norwich draw, when we were winless all season, when we were circling the drain, when we thought we were going down despite being the richest club in the world, and we clung on for a point at home with 10 men. Like, the distance this club has come with those 2 exactly the same scorelines is just staggering. And there'll probably be some kind of UEFA statement. They've already taken the VAR guys off their game tonight. They'll probably finally enact that advisory rule change they had in April, because how can you let something like that decide such a big game of football? But just forget about that. You gotta take that hit and you've got to move on. That's pretty much what Eddie Howe said in the press conference. It's the attitude you know the players are going to be having in training. So it's one of them things. Am I angry? Yeah, I'm really angry about it. Am I sad? Yes, I'm absolutely gutted. Not just for me, but for some of the players in that squad who should have battling defensive 1-0 win away to PSG as a memory they can have forever. Like, think about Jamal Lascelles. He didn't put a foot wrong. Nick Pope made some of the best saves I've ever seen a Newcastle player make, and it's all just kind of going to get erased now because of that decision at the end. Like, I am gutted for them. But if they beat Milan at home, which is entirely possible, and PSG fail to beat Dortmund away, which is also entirely possible, they will get out of the group of death into the Champions League round of 16 despite that happening to them. And what an achievement that is. Like, even if they drop into the Europa League, that is still huge. Like Steve Bruce always used to say, we just gotta dust ourselves down and go again. And what a trip it is to need to have that mentality after being denied one of the most historic victories in the club's history away in the Champions League to one of the biggest teams in Europe, as opposed to when he used to say it, which is when we'd get beat like 3-0 off Norwich. So yes, there you go. That is implausibly why they gave that decision. Let me know, please, what you think of that in the comments below. Of course, if you enjoy this kind of thing, please do consider subscribing to 442. We love having you here, and subscribing is the one thing that really, really helps us out, so we'd love to have you on board for that. Get me on Twitter, at Adam Cleary, Clery. I'm going through the various stages of grief over there. First there was bargaining, then anger, and now I'm just kind of doing memes about it. Let's all join in with that, and until next time, this is 442, and that's football, I'm afraid. I'll see you soon. Bye.